A wedding is meant to be the beginning of forever, a moment frozen in time where two souls stand together, bound by promises of love, trust, and loyalty. A day filled with laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses, and whispered dreams of a future yet to come. But what if that promise, sealed with a kiss, was broken before the night had even ended? What if, beneath the carefully curated smiles and perfectly planned vows, betrayal had already taken root? What if, as the final guests bid their goodbyes and the music faded into the quiet hum of the night, something far more disturbing was set in motion? This was not just a wedding, it was a ticking time bomb, and by sunrise, the echoes of joy would be replaced with screams. A husband, a best friend. A night meant for celebration that turned into a crime scene, the floor littered with shattered glass, a white dress no longer pristine but stained with something far darker. A discovery so gruesome, so incomprehensible, that even seasoned investigators would struggle to piece together what truly happened in that hotel room. How does a moment meant for happiness turn into a nightmare? What pushes love beyond the brink into obsession, deceit, and ultimately murder? Was this a crime of passion, a sudden moment of rage that spiraled out of control? Or had the betrayal been festering long before the wedding bells rang? Had someone, perhaps, been planning this from the very beginning? Tonight, we uncover the disturbing truth behind the wedding night that ended in tragedy, a crime that didn't just shatter one life, but sent shockwaves through an entire town, the kind of story whispered about in hushed tones, where the details seem too horrifying to be real. But before we get to the final, chilling moments, the blood on the floor, the frantic 911 call, and the haunting look in the killer's eyes, we need to go back to where it all began. Welcome to Shocking True Crime Stories, where the most chilling, real-life crimes come to light. Every case we cover is based on true events, some terrifying, some unbelievable, but all shocking. If you have a passion for uncovering the darkest mysteries of the criminal world, you're in the right place. Subscribe now, and let's dive into the depths of true crime together. Emma and John's love story wasn't just the kind you see in movies. It was something deeper, something rooted in years of shared history. They had grown up together, their lives intertwined from the very beginning. Childhood friends who became high school sweethearts, who weathered life's ups and downs hand in hand. They had walked the same paths, shared the same dreams, whispered about the future long before they were old enough to understand what forever truly meant. To those who knew them, their wedding was not a question of if, only when. When John finally proposed, beneath a sky full of stars, it felt like the natural continuation of a love story that had already been written. Their families cheered, friends toasted to their happiness, and Emma believed she had found her perfect ending. But love stories are never as simple as they seem, because every love story has its shadows, and in theirs, that shadow had a name: Lisa. Lisa wasn't just anyone. She was Emma's best friend, the girl who had been there through every milestone, through every heartbreak and triumph, the one who knew all of Emma's secrets, while keeping the most dangerous one of all to herself. She wasn't just a friend. She wasn't just the maid of honor, standing beside Emma as she stepped into her future. Lisa was something far more devastating. Lisa was the other woman. As Emma and John planned their perfect day, Lisa was there, helping pick the flowers, choosing the perfect wedding gown, standing beside Emma as she found the dress that would make her feel like a bride, smiling, laughing, playing the part of a devoted best friend, while carrying a truth so cruel, so unforgivable, that it could only lead to disaster. Because what Emma didn't know, what she could never have imagined, was that the man she was about to marry, the man who had promised her forever, was already giving pieces of himself to someone else, and that someone else was the very person she trusted most. Lisa and John's secret had been buried deep, hidden beneath stolen glances and whispered conversations. But secrets, no matter how carefully guarded, always find a way to surface. And on the night of the wedding, beneath the shimmering lights of a carefully decorated ballroom, surrounded by friends and family who believed they were witnessing the beginning of a lifelong love, that secret would be exposed in the most brutal way imaginable, because love, when betrayed, doesn't just break hearts. Sometimes it kills. Some say affairs happen in a single reckless moment, a fleeting lapse in judgment, a spark that ignites too quickly to be extinguished. Others believe they grow slowly, like roots beneath the surface, invisible until they're too deeply entrenched to pull free. But whatever the case, whatever the excuse, the affair between John and Lisa had already taken hold long before the wedding. A glance held a second too long. A touch that lingered when it shouldn't have. A whispered conversation just out of Emma's earshot. It was there, in the stolen moments, in the silence between words, in the way John's eyes would sometimes drift when he thought no one was watching, the kind of thing that, on the surface, seemed harmless, but deep down, something dangerous had already begun. Maybe it started with friendship, maybe it started with curiosity, but at some point, lines were crossed, and once crossed, there was no turning back. For Emma, the wedding was a promise, a vow that would bind her to the man she had loved for as long as she could remember, a celebration of their future, of the life they were about to build together. But for Lisa, it was something else entirely, a farewell, a test, a challenge to see how far things could go before it all crumbled, or maybe it was the beginning of something even more dangerous. Because as the guests laughed and danced, as champagne glasses clinked and music filled the air, something else was happening behind closed doors. Something unseen, something unravelling, thread by thread. Emma, blissfully unaware, believed she was stepping into the happiest chapter of her life. She believed John was hers, that their love was unshakable, that the night was a celebration of everything they had fought for, everything they had built. But for John and Lisa, the wedding wasn't a finish line. It was the start of a countdown. It happened quickly, faster than anyone could have predicted. One moment, John and Emma were in their honeymoon suite, a room filled with the remnants of celebration, gifts stacked in the corner, half-empty champagne flutes on the bedside table, the soft glow of candlelight flickering against the walls, the perfect ending to what should have been the happiest night of their lives. But happiness is fragile, and in just a few moments, it shattered. John shifted in his seat, his fingers drumming against the arm of the chair. His smile was there, but it didn't reach his eyes. And then, an excuse. A simple, casual remark about needing air, about clearing his head after a long, overwhelming day. A kiss pressed against Emma's forehead, a quiet reassurance, "I'll be back soon." But he wasn't alone. Just a few doors down, Lisa was waiting. A different room, a different atmosphere, a space untouched by the weight of wedding vows or the expectations of a lifelong commitment. There were no champagne flutes, no bridal gown draped over a chair, just two people locked away from prying eyes. And as the last of the wedding guests drifted into sleep, John stepped inside, the door closed behind him, and then silence. What happened in that room remains a secret only they know. A conversation whispered too softly for the walls to betray, hands reaching for each other in the darkness, a moment stolen, reckless, irreversible. But while John and Lisa disappeared into their own world, there was someone else who hadn't yet closed her eyes. Emma wasn't sleeping. Not yet. She had been waiting. The minutes stretched into an hour. She checked the time, the hallway, the balcony, each moment bringing a growing unease that she couldn't explain. She told herself he was coming back, that he wouldn't leave her alone on their wedding night, that whatever was keeping him away was innocent. It had to be. But then the doubt set in, the ache in her chest, the weight in her stomach, and finally, she couldn't ignore it any longer. She left the suite, stepped into the dimly lit hallway, bare feet silent against the plush carpet, past closed doors, past the echoes of distant music still playing in some forgotten part of the hotel, until, finally, she reached one door in particular, and inside, John was not alone. What Emma saw in that moment changed everything. The truth, raw and undeniable, stood before her, a betrayal too deep to comprehend, too painful to put into words, and in that instant, something inside her broke. The wedding was over. But the real story, the one that would leave blood on the walls, was only just beginning. Betrayal has many faces. Some come in whispered lies, in hidden glances, in secrets buried beneath years of trust. But for Emma, betrayal was not a quiet thing. It wasn't hidden in the shadows or left to speculation. It was right in front of her, undeniable, unthinkable, and playing out before her very eyes. Her husband, her best friend, tangled together in a moment that should have never happened, a moment that shattered everything. We may never know exactly how the confrontation began, whether Emma screamed the moment she stepped inside or if she stood there first, silent, stunned, waiting for an explanation that would never come. Did John scramble for excuses? Did Lisa try to reach for her, her voice laced with panic and guilt? Or was the silence more damning than any words could have been? What we do know is how it ended. At precisely 3:27 a.m., a guest on the second floor, just beneath the room where it all happened, picked up the phone and called hotel security. The reason? A loud crash, a shattering sound like glass against the floor, and then a scream, not just any scream, a sound so raw, so full of terror, that it cut through the stillness of the night like a blade, and then, just as suddenly, silence. Security rushed to the room, their footsteps echoing down the empty corridor. They knocked, no answer. They knocked again, louder this time, but still, nothing. And then, finally, they pushed open the door. What they found inside would haunt them forever. Emma was on the floor, motionless, a pool of crimson spreading beneath her, soaking into the fabric of her wedding dress, turning white into red. The champagne flutes on the nightstand trembled from the disturbance, one knocked over, spilling onto the carpet. A broken lamp lay nearby, shards of glass reflecting the dim hotel light, and standing over her, hands trembling, fingers stained with blood, was John. His breaths came in ragged gasps. His eyes were wide, unfocused, as if trying to piece together what had just happened, as if, in that moment, he wasn't sure himself. In the corner of the room, Lisa stood frozen. Her face was pale, her lips parted, but no sound came out. She didn't move, she didn't speak. She just stared at what had been done, at the irreversible consequences of a night that had spiraled far beyond anything she had imagined. A wedding night turned crime scene, a husband caught in the act, and a best friend staring down at the wreckage of a moment that could never be undone. The official story? It was simple, or at least that's what John wanted everyone to believe. He claimed self-defense, that Emma had lunged at him, blinded by rage, fists clenched, voice shaking with betrayal, that he had only reacted in the heat of the moment, trying to protect himself, that he hadn't meant to hurt her, that it was all a terrible accident. But the evidence told a different story. Emma wasn't struck down in a single moment of panic. The crime scene told of something much more violent, much more prolonged, multiple stab wounds, each one deliberate, forceful. Defensive marks on Emma's hands, deep gashes across her palms and forearms, signs that she had fought back, that she had tried desperately to protect herself from the man she once trusted with her life. There was no single act of self-defense here. This was a struggle, a fight for survival that had lasted far longer than John had admitted. And then there was Lisa. She had been in the room. She had seen everything. But when the police asked her what had happened, she said nothing. Not a single word. Not at the crime scene. Not during initial questioning. Not even as they placed John in handcuffs and led him away. Was she too shocked to speak? Too horrified to process what had unfolded before her? Or was there something else? Something she was hiding? Did she play a role in Emma's death? Did she try to stop it? Or did she just stand there and watch? The case quickly became a media storm, drawing national attention. Experts debated the crime on television. Psychologists analysed John's demeanour. Internet forums exploded with theories. Some believed John's story, that it was a tragic accident fuelled by emotion. Others saw it as something much darker, a murder driven by lust, by guilt, by the weight of secrets that could no longer be contained. But in the end, it wasn't the public's opinion that mattered. It was up to 12 people sitting in a courtroom, 12 strangers faced with the burden of deciding John's fate. Was this an accident or cold-blooded murder? The trial wasn't just about justice. It was about unravelling the truth behind a crime that had left an entire town shaken. It was about the final moments of a woman who had walked into her wedding night full of love, only to meet a fate no one could have predicted, and at the centre of it all was John. Sitting at the defence table, he no longer looked like the man from his wedding photos, the man who had smiled for the cameras, hands wrapped around his bride's waist. Now he was hollow-eyed, hunched over, his once pristine suit traded for the dull tones of a courtroom. But was that the look of a man consumed by guilt, or of someone who still believed he could walk free? The prosecution wasted no time in tearing apart John's version of events. They called expert witnesses, forensic analysts, and crime scene investigators, each one painting a damning picture of what had really happened in that hotel room. They described the force behind each stab wound, the signs of a prolonged struggle, the blood spatter patterns that contradicted John's claims, and most chilling of all, the lack of any injuries on John himself. If he had truly been acting in self-defense, why was Emma the only one who had suffered? Then there was Lisa. She took the stand, her hands trembling as she swore to tell the truth. But did she? Because her testimony was as fragmented as the night itself, contradictory, uncertain. She claimed she didn't see the actual moment the knife was plunged into Emma's body, that she was in shock, frozen in fear, that she never thought John would actually... Her voice trailed off. She never finished that sentence. But the damage had already been done. The jury didn't need her to say it outright. The evidence spoke louder than her words ever could. For weeks, the courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every seat. Cameras flashed outside the courthouse. The public debated every detail. Was John a man who had simply lost control in the heat of the moment? Or had he known, from the second Emma walked through that door that she would not be leaving alive. And then, the verdict. The jury filed back in, their faces unreadable. The room fell silent, every breath held, every eye locked onto John. The foreman stood, a single word cut through the tension like a knife. Guilty. Some gasped, others whispered. John sat motionless, as if he hadn't heard it, as if he was still waiting for another outcome. But there would be no other outcome. The sentence was swift, life in prison, no chance of parole. A wedding night that had started with champagne and vows of forever had ended with a lifetime behind bars. Love. A word meant to symbolize trust, devotion, the promise of a lifetime. Betrayal, a wound that cuts deeper than any blade, shattering bonds that were once thought unbreakable. Murder, a single act that cannot be undone, leaving behind nothing but grief, questions and the inescapable weight of what could have been. 3 lives forever altered by one night, a bride who never made it to the honeymoon, a husband who traded a wedding ring for prison shackles, and a best friend trapped in the aftermath of a love triangle that ended in the most brutal way possible. But when we strip away the headlines, the courtroom drama, and the whispers of scandal, what are we left with? A crime of passion, or something much darker? Did John snap in the heat of the moment, overcome by guilt and fear? Or had the betrayal been leading to this all along? Could Emma's fate have been avoided? Could someone, anyone, have stopped this before it was too late? The truth is, we may never know. The evidence tells one story, but human nature tells another. And in the end, justice doesn't always bring closure. It only brings an ending. But what do you think? Was this an inevitable tragedy, or a crime that could have been prevented? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you thought this case was shocking, just wait until you hear about the next story we're covering, a tale of deception, greed, and a betrayal. It will leave you questioning everything. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching.